And give me a moment. And it's going.
Hello, welcome to Burgundy Gone Dutch. This is a class about advanced shade work and thinking about how political machinations of former states infect art styles. My name is Osana van der Linden, and everybody calls me Linden. I'm from Ansteorra in Burgundy. And if you click on the chat messages, over here, there is I'm sorry, that sound is bugging me. Over here, there is the handout for the class. And there are some images in there that I would like you to reference. So if you could open that on your desktop so you can look at it as we talk. Just let me know when everybody has that. And as we go through this, there's only a couple of us here. So I would really be interested to hear everybody's questions and thoughts as we move along and make this more of a collaborative process, okay? I'm trying to. Sorry, I'm trying to open it on my desktop and now I can't. That's just silly. Okay. So everybody have that open? Cool. All right. So today we're talking about illumination in the region of Burgundy. Burgundy was once a separate kingdom. It has a very strong sense of national identity, especially in this time period. Now, at this point, it is a duchy, the Duchy of Burgundy. Now, during this time, so this is 1490 to 1550. The particular illumination in this piece comes from an unnamed book of hours produced by Ghent Associates between 1490 and 1500. It was probably originally made for Philip the Handsome, who was the Duke of Austria and Burgundy, and also the Count of Flanders. So what was going on at the time that affected this art? What's going on is a trade war. The Duke of Burgundy decided that his interests did not align with Louis the Ninth. He felt that those trade options were going to not work for Burgundy as a whole. And so they decided to kind of throw their cart over with the Netherlands and work with them instead. So they started to do a lot more exporting to the Netherlands. And as a result, a lot of their art and a lot of their trade goods started to be influenced by Netherlandish styles. So if you look at the illumination of this time right before this, it's
we're not seeing that page. I think no, I think the screen needs to be reset, or you need to tell that to be your primary.
Is that better?
Nope, I'm seeing you. I think we're supposed to be seeing her page on the table.
Yeah, you probably want to look at my hands.
Yeah, I've got your hands, so I'm not sure why you're not seeing it. Oh, wait a minute, let me try something. Spotlight. I bet you the spotlight does it. There you go. Better?
That's it. I can see it now.
Great. Okay. Tennis for one, spotlights for all.
Okay, so whenever you do illumination, you have to think about the time period it comes from and the influences that it has, because that will figure into how you present that illumination and the influences of the artists at the time. And it really seems like extra work, but it's so fun to learn. And it's really informative about the style and what other places you can look for influences for it. And it really just kind of informs you as an artist. And I tell you, there's no better way to geek out, or at least for me. All right, so let's talk about tools you need. Does everybody have experience with illumination?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Everybody feel pretty comfortable with the basic stuff? Does anybody have any questions about the basic stuff or setup? No? Okay.
No, I think we're all good.
Actually, a question about the colors in the palette, especially the one in the lower left.
Wash your hands.
I'm dyslexic. Which one?
The ones with
Wash your
greens and
hands.
pinks. Yes, that one.
This one. Okay. What's your question?
What basic pigments did you use to mix those colors?
This is from a cool red, which I think was your basic crimson from Turner, is a blue toned red. All of the reds in the example illumination we're going to be recreating today have a cool tone, so I used a cool toned red as the base.
The
And-
soft greens are beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I am terrible about cleaning out my palettes, and I just keep using those paints until they fall apart. So if there's something in here that I don't know what it is, we can try and recreate the color, but all right, on the handout there is a swatch. Oh, hey, Katie. It's good to see you. There's a swatch card that is not really true to life. It's actually on this page, if that's helpful. All the colors that we're using today. Do you guys see all those? We got a shell gold. We've got some blues. We got some greens. You'll notice that the greens are a little dirty. They have a little bit of gray in them, and that the blues are also cool toned, but the purple is a red toned purple. I pulled those all from the original illumination. You have to be very careful when you're mixing colors. I'm sure all you guys know, but just in case, there's, have you ever read that book, Red and Blue Do Not Make Purple?
I thought it was red and I thought it was yellow and blue don't make green.
Oh, well, maybe that's what it is.
And for anybody who just added,
Color you expect.
yeah, anybody who just added late, I put the handout back over on the chat.
Oh, thank you. So the whole point of that book generally is that you cannot mix a warm toned color with a cool toned color and expect it to work. There is no universe wherein you get a green and it does not have a cool tone or a warm tone to it. It might be yellow cast, it might be blue cast. It's not going to be a pure green. There's no such thing, or at least there's almost no such thing. And the same thing goes for any other primary you have. So if you use the right toned colors together, you will get a more pure color or a cleaner color, and you don't want to blend things into each other that have the wrong cast to them, unless that's what they're doing in the illumination, because it will make mud. You'll get a brown undertone, and if that's not what you're going for, you'll be very sad. Okay, let's scroll down to the art. There's a lot of like chatter in there, but if you look at the original illumination, it's about midway through the packet. This square is pretty small. It's about 2 inches wide. I've reproduced it larger because that makes it easier to show you the color transitions. But I want you to really look at this thing. You're going to notice that it doesn't have any blacks in it at all, except for the shading that's in the shell gold behind the S. There's no blacks. You're only using darker tones of the colors that you're painting with. This uses a lot of wet on wet shading, where the colors are smoothed together with the effort of a wet brush. So I'm going to start putting color down while we're talking. If you guys want to paint along, you're welcome to. If you'd rather do it later, you're welcome to. There is a clean copy of the stencil at the bottom of the packet. And now I can't find any useful brushes, of course. So normally when I paint a shell gold in the background, I would put a red underneath it. But if you look at this, you can almost see the texture of the parchment through the gold. So I don't think that they used a ground. I think it's just shell gold straight on the parchment. Do you guys see what I mean?
Yep.
So how is everyone doing today? You guys know how to paint with water tension?
So when you're painting with a new color, if you can advise maybe the brand or the color choice.
Okay. The gold that I'm using here is not shell gold. It is Fine Text Gold Palette, which I believe has a different name. Eleanor did correct me last time, and I'm afraid it's gone out of my head.
Colorio?
Yeah, the Colorio colors. I still have my old one. They last forever. They're a little pricey at the beginning. It's like $26 for a palette, but you can replace pots individually. So it really makes it worth the money to have the full range and then be able to replace the ones that you use the most without having to buy a new palette. It's an intensely forgiving palette. You just add water to it and it paints beautifully. You might have to do one or more coats. I'm not really displaying very good technique here because I'm like, I have to hurry. So what I'm going to do.
Gold are you using?
I'm sorry, what were you saying?
Which shade of gold are you using?
This one here, which I don't remember which one that is.
I think the dark one is Arabic gold, maybe?
I think it is. And actually, I think now that I'm doing it, I have made the wrong choice and I should have gone with the duller gold here because this one is too red. I think I did that on the sample I painted. Well, maybe not. Either way, I should have gone with the lighter one.
Mommy, can I put in my switch?
Baby, I am teaching a class. Please go ask your brother.
Mommy, can I put in my switch? What? Can I put in my switch?
Kids. Okay, so I'm not going to make you watch me paint this whole thing. I'm just trying to get a little bit of the colors together so that you can see the differences. And I put a little bit of gold around the snail because he's fun to paint. And I am crossing the lines a little bit here. All of that will be covered by the next color you lay. So if you cross the pencil line unintentionally or something, it's not the end of the world. I had a aneurysm earlier this year and I've had to kind of relearn painting and I can't quite get my hand to stop shaking. So I first started doing this because I was trying to figure out how to teach shading to more people, because it seems like there is not a dearth of understanding, because lots of people understand it, but it's difficult to teach like in a organic way. So I thought I would take examples from all over the place and try to compare those shading techniques to show the full breadth of what is available in period. And of course, that's like several lifetimes worth of work. And I, don't recommend it, but it's really fun.
So Lyndon, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I know when you do laid gold or the gold leaf, you always do that at the end. Shell gold, was it done at the beginning often, or?
I don't know what the order was in period.
Okay.
I tend to do it beforehand because when I'm gilding, I do it at the beginning because it can stick to paint.
Oh, you're right. I take it back. You do that first and then work around it, don't you?
Yeah,
Okay.
at least that's my memory of it. All right, now while the shell gold is wet, you want to add the little bit of black shadow. That makes it look like the S is floating above the page. Now, I usually just kind of do that in the lid of my colors, get a good load of pigment. You just don't want to put your brush back in the gold after you put black in it. You can put it back in your black. That's fine. All right, so in the original, the light is coming from the top left. And it looks like it's almost above, but it's a soft light. So it's not a hard line shadow. So you want to try and like trace the edge of each element and then kind of fuzz it out into the background. You don't want it to be hard or defined. You just want it to give it the suggestion of depth. I really like to do this while the gold is still wet because it allows you to blend it more smoothly. But like all gouache, if you have to do it later, that's okay. Because you can always wet blend back into things. It's just smoother if you do it right away. Okay. Now my light's quite bright, but can you see the shading there? Or is it just hidden?
Oh, it's very subtle, but I think I see it.
Okay. Things are subtle. You want to go for the whole look, not just the one element. So you don't want to overdo any particular bit. All right, so while I was getting ready for the class, I started wetting my paints so that they could be fully hydrated when I got to it. And I've got an extra cup of water here so that I can wet my paints with clean water. But of course, I've already gotten it dirty because I put my paintbrush in the wrong one. All right, so when you're laying the paint onto the leaf, let's talk about the idealized world of Netherlands illumination. These guys were fanciful. They had this amazing outlook on the world where everything was their oyster and everything was great. All their painters painted these glorious scenes of their new merchant wealth. And they just had like the whole world to themselves. And they really enjoyed that wealth and they idealized it. And it brought about this whole strain of optimism in their culture. And so I think that that translates to their art, that their art is also idealized. So if you look back at the original, so you can see the full form of the S, that is not real. It's definitely inspired by nature, but it is certainly not realistic. Do you guys see what I mean there? How the branch twists and curves, and it has all these little knots and stuff on it, but it's not what a real branch would look like. It doesn't have all of the flaws or the bugs or any of the other stuff that would make it real.
Or be blue.
Or also being blue and pink.
Flowers could be pink. I could see that, but the vine, maybe not quite so blue.
Probably not. Yeah, it's like way idealized. And even the shading they use is smooth. And when it's not smooth, it's made with these very fine drawn lines, not hatching or line work, but lines that actually follow the edges of the leaf. So when you're painting with surface tension, just for those that don't know, you want to make sure that your paint is about the consistency of cheap lotion, like sunscreen. And you want to go to the edges. So if I were teaching you actually how to paint, I would say you go to the edges like this. You paint around the edges just like you're icing a cookie. And then you use more paint to pull the edges down. And that creates a very smooth and even lake of color. And I just painted with gold. Of course I did. I feel like my husband's watching me type. Do you know what I mean? Where like somebody's watching you do something that you know innately, and yet you can't do it right because someone's watching you.
Oh, yeah. Try having a French chef watch you try to cut an onion. There's
Oh my-
no way. It's hopeless.
That would be terrible.
He made fun of us. It was fun.
So we've got that down. And I thought I mixed the blue, but that's not the right color. That's like some kind of wackiness. I have to add to that. Does anybody have any questions?
I was wondering if you paint all of this in the same setting, or do you come back after it's dried, the first layer maybe to be dried, or is it all, I think you mentioned something about wet
Oh, yes.
painting.
A wet in wet technique.
Mhm.
No, you use a wet brush to do the shading, but you do want the flats to be dry. And I was trying to do it in little pieces, so I would get at least little pieces that are going to dry, but it's super humid here, so I don't know if that's going to work out. We'll see. Yeah, that blue needs to be a lot more baby. How do you guys like to mix paint?
Well, I'm going to be told I'm doing it wrong, but I first I'll give them a little wet. I have, old paints like you. And then I sometimes just get my brush wet and just brush along the edge to pick up the paint rather than get the whole thing soaked. That may be because I've had to jump and run and do something else so many times. I'd rather deal with the palettes that's only slightly damp.
Yeah, that's a totally valid technique for a lot of different kinds of painting. And I often will paint with dry pigments with a wet brush, like especially if I'm doing shading or dry brushing techniques, because you need to be able to control the viscosity of the paint. When I'm wetting this ahead of time, I was just preparing to do all the flats. And that just makes it easy to do all the flats.
Wash your hands.
Yes, Coley Bear?
Wash your hands.
Go ahead, baby. Eat a chop. May I introduce my son, Coley? All right.
Very active house.
Yeah, sorry. I have 5 kids, and my son is having a day with one of his friends because they're allowed to have one friend over during the pandemic. And yeah.
You were asking about how to mix the paints. When I first squeeze out a bit into a palette.
Mhm.
We'll use a drop or, well, usually maybe 2 or 3 drops of water to start, but then I'll mix it with a toothpick. And if I don't have a toothpick, I can use the back, the bottom end of the paintbrush, but never the bristles.
Oh, why never the bristles?
Not when you're mixing, because it wears them out. So you can load your brush like you're doing with the one that's already been rehydrated and it's already been mixed to some degree. But if you start trying to mix from paint and water and you're mixing it all together with your paint bristles, it can wear them out a lot faster. So you want to use something more solid like the bottom end of your brush or a toothpick or a coffee stirrer. If you've got the little wooden ones, I like those.
That's good advice. I just buy crappy paintbrushes.
Well, yeah, and I know some. I don't know if Eleanor, if you run the Scribes Guild up in your area, but I have scribes in Stargate when we're doing the Scribes Guild, and I've seen some really crappy brushes because they've worked hard with them and they've used them. Yep.
Yes, buddy, go ahead.
Silver wares.
Yes, baby.
I use the Kalis brushes, which are fabulous. They're sable and they're not that expensive.
Which kind?
Kalish Finest brushes.
Oh, okay, cool.
I think they're located in New Jersey.
I like the Winsor Newton. I forget if it's Golden Scepter or Scepter Golden, but I think it's Golden Scepter. It's half synthetic and half sable because the Scribes Guild students, when they're painting, they can be pretty hard. So that's where the synthetic helps, but then the extra sable in there with the brush bristles helps for the absorption. If it's all synthetic, it's sometimes not absorbing as much to carry the paint to the piece.
For my Scribes Guild, I buy the brushes, very, very specific, with the yellow handles, so I can identify them and get the back at the end.
I use duct tape.
I actually think that they might be a mixture of synthetic and sable. They're slightly better quality, but they're cheap better quality. And it's basically a series I found that I can get again and again from, I think, Hobby Lobby.
Duct tape is now making colors in like tape size, Scotch tape size thicknesses. So I'll wrap the bottom of our paintbrushes in the baronial colors.
Yeah. I'll start doing that when I can no longer get these brushes.
For teaching live, I use golden Takelon brushes from Craftsmart. They're $8 for a pack of 4, and they're quite fine, which makes it easier to paint charters.
Yep. I use these guys. These are Zem Golden Teclon liners. And I buy a new pack every couple months or so, but they come with 8 in them. You can buy them on Amazon for $7.
I do separate my gold brush from my white line brush, and I don't use them for anything else because that way the paint never gets into the bristle, the brass holder, whatever you call that. I forget the word.
The barrel.
The barrel, thank you. That way it doesn't have some of the green that tends to stain badly. But it's always for white work or it's always for gold work.
Well, while you guys were talking, I started to put a mixing white mixed with part of the blue onto the stem to start to build the depth of the stem. And ordinarily, I would just let that dry.
So what do you use for mixing white?
Huh?
What do you use for mixing white?
The one that's labeled mixing white.
Okay.
In the Winsor Newton, we use zinc white.
Yeah. Okay. I actually write on the outside of the tube, which mixing. So I have to go look every time.
And then the permanent white on the Winsor Newton is for the detailing, the lining.
Right. To find mixing.
So here's, oh, these are both permanent white. Whoops. Pick.
So when you put white line down on the blue, it looked like it was somewhat well defined as a white line, and then you just kind of feathered it out a little bit so that it's blended more. Is that?
Yeah, but I haven't mixed it in yet.
Oh, okay.
All right, so to do the mixing, you want to clean your brush off, and I usually just kind of rub it on my hand because you want it to be damp, but not really wet. And then you sort of just kind of rub against the edge of the white and the blue and pull them together very gently.
Okay, so your mixing white is pretty thick.
It is a little bit, but it's, you can pull the color forward and backward to better define the edge of the line. Can you guys even see?
I think I went back to the handout. I can see it real good
Yeah.
on the handout. That's actually better.
Yeah, sorry.
Put the camera down.
Oh, good. Yeah, see, this was a little too much because it's pulling the white too far.
And are you losing the edge of the blue a little?
A little.
Okay. Just confirming what I'm seeing.
Yeah, it's not as intended, but you know, that's art. So what I'm gonna do is cheat and get a little bit of the darker blue and go back and add that to the edge, which would be much better if I did when it was a little drier. The wetness of paint is really important to control as you're working. You get so many different effects, whether the base is wet, pardon me, or dry, or whether the paintbrush is wet. It's a little bit better. Okay, so if you look at the original, it has a bunch of like interesting little nooks in it. And I'm going to add those in a darker blue first. And then I'm going to do the very, very dark darks in the purple. I know you can't see it because my hand's in the way, sorry.
So darker across the top edge where the light isn't? Or?
Yeah, I'm using a liner brush to just trace the very edge to better define it. And I'm going to also draw that against the edges of the leaf that's going to go over the branch to create the shadow underneath. You guys actually have a better view than me because of the cameras in my way. So I hope it's okay. Guys. We're talking about like medieval painting here, not about the fight between you and your baby. Sorry, guys. So if this thing were bigger, I would be using my illuminator's bridge. But because it's not, I'm not. Because I don't actually have to rest my hand on it to get close enough. That looks kind of messy, doesn't it? It all looks a mess.
It looks gorgeous. I'm envious.
But my point is that you can correct a multitude of sins with a wet brush. See here how this is all scratchy? Slightly damp brush. Pull out the color you want. Move the rest down. Pull that upward. Clean up the end of that branch. I don't think I actually want it to cross that way, so I'll just clean that up. and pull upward. See? You don't have to be perfect. You almost have an eraser in your hand. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's the only way I paint because I swear I make a mistake every 3 seconds. All right, now that we have part of that defined, I'm going to go back with the dark purple to define the underside of the branch. Remember when we were talking about where the light comes from? So I'm going to try and do that on the inside corner. And also on the inside of this little knot.
Oh.
And then to make this look like it comes from above, I'll draw that way. I just cannot put paint where I want to today. Okay, so that's like so if you look at the one that I did when I was actually looking at the piece, you can see the pulling of the dark purple here in the lines. Did that show up?
Mhm.
Okay. So that adds to the shading, especially when this is small, because your eye will interpret that as a smooth shade instead of as the line. It actually looks more natural than a block of color when it is that small. And in here, where the lines pull out on the edge of that stick and how it pulls, the leaf pulls up from underneath and you start to pull the blue down there. Does anybody have any questions?
Trying to follow along, so not yet. Having fun painting and trying this. And you on your worst day are probably better than me on my best day. So
No, we're not doing that anymore. We're not giving compliments by self-deprecating. You're not allowed to do that.
it's not self-deprecating. It's acknowledgement of skill worth that. So I'm okay with that. I'm very comfortable with my skill. Forces me to learn technique because I can't depend on any natural innate ability. So
I don't think anybody
learning.
has innate ability. I think it's just honing your eye and trying to figure out what things actually look like. There's a really good book called Drawing with the Right or Left Side of Your Brain that talks about how you have to draw things as they actually are instead of as like this hieroglyph that we're taught as children. Like you draw a stick figure to represent a human. You draw a circle for a face. That's not what faces look like. Faces have lumps. And really looking deeply at something and trying to understand how the shapes interact and the color and the way that the light falls on it and how that changes the shapes and the colors. Man, that's more informative than all the practice.
That's why the classes like this are so valuable. You know, you already had all those examples, and I can look at examples in one step and then the next step and the next step, but it doesn't ingrain on my eyes till I see a person doing it. And then all of a sudden it all makes sense.
I totally
hear
get
it.
that.
Yeah, it's the hearing it too and saying, well, see, I'm looking at this. Because otherwise
Yeah,
the picture's too big. Yeah.
Yeah, I really can't say enough how important that is because people don't see what they're looking at until you help them figure out what it is they're actually seeing and the depth and the colors. Because people think that shadow is always done with gray when it's rarely done with gray. It's usually a darker hue of whatever it is that's casting the color. It also depends on the color on which the shadow is cast. If you have something that's because it informs the color of the shadow and the depth of its darkness. But it's something that people don't really get until you start really looking at it. And one of the things I did to help me really see this was start reading and seeing videos on art history. Because you start seeing what the masters were doing and thinking, you start to see color in a very different way, and technique becomes more apparent.
That is very true.
Oh, yeah, there's a book called How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci, and the book itself is interesting, but the back section of it, the appendices, are how to draw, how to see what he's drawing, and that was fascinating.
I heard Lyndon say earlier that when she was painting the blue stick, that I'm painting this color here, but when you pull out, your eye is going to blend like the dark line and the lighter line. And I think we get so close to the piece that I think every once in a while you need to get away from it and put it in your hand and stretch out your arm and see if your eye is actually blending it. Because you may be trying to blend up close, but you don't really need to, because if you put it further away, you're already naturally going to be blending it with your eye. And if you go and look at, I think, what is it? Oh gosh, I'm trying to think of what the type of art is, where they do all the little dots, but then you get back and you see the people in the background. It's right. So if you go to the museum and you look at that and you look up close and all you see are these splashes of color, and some of them are blended a little bit, and then you step back, 12 feet, you can see the whole picture, and it's not these little splotches of color. It's now blended because of the way your eye is looking at it.
I absolutely recommend that. Also, if you need a different perspective on something you're working on, taking a picture of it with your phone or something,
right,
really change your perspective on what you're looking at. You'll notice things that are missing that you don't see close up. So it literally gives you a different perspective.
Just remember that what you think is the worst piece or the worst part of your piece, most people will never see it. It's like, oh, that's my mistake. They never see it.
No, they don't see it.
They see the whole. They don't see what you are focusing in on.
I know at the very beginning of the pandemic, when I suddenly had to shut down our Scrabble guild, I started doing online forgiveness Scrabble meetings, where I said, use a marker, use a Sharpie, whatever you got, doesn't matter. And when you're done, put it on the refrigerator and stand back. And if it looks good on the refrigerator, it's good enough. It's just refrigerator art. Because we needed a lot of forgiveness at the beginning.
Yeah, we did. I'd like to change the shape of that knot a little bit. And this is too dark. I've got to fix it. Anyway, so I'm just going to keep playing with this and talking about it.
I think you have about 20 minutes.
Yes.
Oh, I'm supposed to be paying attention to that, aren't I? Yes. Okay.
Yeah, class monitor.
That's okay. I was watching you. I'm not painting, so I'll have to print that blank out next time.
I drew a bad sketch of it. So I could play along. I'm not making fun. It was a bad sketch of it. It really was. But it was enough to play.
Yeah, that's the point, is to play with it. One of the things I would like to do is try and texture the leaf a little bit. So I'll keep doing that. But the conversation we're having is wonderful, and I absolutely encourage it to continue. Okay.
So how do you texture the leaf?
I think we're going to see.
Well, we might. We'll see. It looks like it's dry enough. See, I didn't mix my paint clean enough, and it's got little bumps. So I'm just
I've
going to
noticed
put
that
my finger
paint
over the
does that
surface
sometimes.
to pull those off. Sometimes it'll muss your surface of your paint, but you really don't want to have a bump there when you're trying to shade.
Yeah, that's why I like the flat toothpicks, because then I can sort of smush the paint when I'm mixing it with the water.
Oh, there you
So
go.
that it mixes all the paint bits smoothly. Or like I said, you can use the back end of your brush.
The older paint gets, and
Yeah.
because I let mine sit in a thing, it's more likely to do this. And I think this pink might be from when I painted this originally, like 2 years ago.
I think sometimes the larger pieces of pigment are still in there, and you've lost most of the gum arabic because of the painting. And sometimes it might help. I took a class with a professional calligrapher, and we were talking about the use of gum arabic, and he said they put it, you know, in the Winsor Newton or the golden paints or whatever you're using, but it doesn't hurt to add an extra drop if you feel you need to. So,
right. If you feel like your paint is too watery and needs more body, you can add gum arabic to it.
And it's like salt at a restaurant. They only add just enough, but if you need more, you can add more.
Okay, so one of the things that I have to do sometimes is remind myself of where a line is. And I'm just going to commit scribal sin right now. And I'm going to draw it back in.
We didn't put a disclaimer on this class.
That we were committing scribal sins.
I'm glad you could do that, though.
What is it? Tetuva? The imp, the demon of scribes.
Oh, Titavilius.
That's it.
Titavilius,
got it.
I always remember it because that's where the word tittle comes from, which is
really?
on top of an I or a J.
Oh, that's what it's called.
So it's an easy way to remember it.
Well, I can appreciate your shakiness because I was diagnosed recently with high thyroid, so they've given me a pill to try to tap that down. But in the meantime, I'm shaky.
Yeah, I have to take a whole bunch of stuff for nerve pain. And it makes me sleepy and kind of dumb and also shake. So
when you're holding your brush in, it looks like your right hand, are you holding something else in your left hand? I told that's a trick to help you not grip so hard on your right hand. It's a mental thing.
I'll have a Pokeball then.
Yeah, that sometimes it forces your brain to balance the pressure of holding, and so therefore you don't hold as heavily or tightly on your dominant hand that you're painting with.
Yeah. Remember, you guys, when you're painting, that you want to be using your arm to the elbow. Like, you're not just using your hand. You can hold your hand in one position and then use your arm to move the brush forward. And that's actually a smoother and cleaner stroke, especially if you're making a curved line. So I'm just adding layers of mixing white to the top of this bump on the leaf. And I'm trying to do it little by little because I kind of overwhelmed the other one before. But normally I would just kind of slather this stuff on here. And I say that you want to use mixing white instead of permanent white. I remember scoffing at it when I was a baby scribe. Why do you need two whites? That's crazy. But when you mix in permanent white into your paint, it makes all your colors dull. It's a very pervasive pigment. So even when you've kind of totally washed out and you're just using the color, when you look at it, it will be dull. They won't have the same vibrancy at all. So it's really important that you only mix your colors lighter with mixing white.
And that's the way the manufacturers designed them.
Yes, it is. But like, I just thought it was a scam initially. Like, this is just how you get more people to buy more paint. But it really does. I actually was having some trouble with a scroll I was working on, and I couldn't figure out why I couldn't get the colors right. And it was because I had left permanent white on my palette and I was using it to mix. All right, so I'm just drawing across. Have you guys ever painted a miniature or done any kind of like relief work
Yes.
about like the highs and the lows?
Well, they suck. I did an entire scroll which is yet to be presented, and it has 10 portraits on it, and each rectangle they're in is 1.5 inches by 3/4 of an inch.
Oh, you and your tiny work, I swear.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I could show you a picture of it if you guys want. I can show you pieces of it. And I used period pigment, so I didn't use.
Is that the one you showed me?
Yeah, I'm sure. It's
Oh.
been over a year, almost a year since I delivered the scroll.
And it hasn't been given?
No, he keeps pushing off the elevation.
Oh my God.
So
Well,
yeah, I have done it.
maybe he wants to do it in person.
Yeah.
He does. That is part of it. He was announced in December of 19.
Mhm.
He was going to be elevated at our coronation Meridies in April of 20. That didn't work out.
Yeah.
And then he said, okay, I'll do it at the next coronation, which will be April of 21. Yeah, that didn't work out. So the scroll is dated and everything else, and I don't care anymore. And whatever, it's delivered, it's framed, I'm done.
Some of ours, we just went ahead and elevated them, and then they're going to have a party or a vigil later.
Well,
Yeah.
there's a long reason behind it that gets into things that I don't need to get into here, but he's decided that it will be when this crown steps down, that's when it'll happen. So we'll see when that's going to be, because we still don't know that yet. And also he knows that the scroll has been delivered, and he doesn't know I'm the one who did it, but he knows that it's been delivered and it's already dated. And you know, it is what it is.
Comes with a good story.
Yeah. Well, anyway, to answer the question, the hard part is getting the flesh tones and making it look. You have to figure out what time and place you're doing the portraiture, because portraiture in certain times and spaces are not the same portraiture as the lifelike you will get when you start getting closer to the Tudor period.
Yeah.
Also, what colors are actually physically available to that time and place that you are doing the scroll. If you maintain that integrity, you're not always having an entire palette of color that you will have in the later, when the Silk Road is really brought across some of these luscious colors that weren't available in, say, 13th, 14th, and early 15th centuries. Also, Italy had their versions and Bruges had theirs. So what time and place makes a huge difference, what kind of portraiture you're doing and how realistic. So
Hey, I meant to mention to you about the way how to limn. Do you have that book? There's a book by Hillard, like by the miniature maker of Elizabeth I. Like we can just buy it on Amazon. I think it's $14. It's a firsthand source of how to get the pigments, of how to mix the pigments, what clothes you should wear while you're making the pigments. Like,
you know, I do have my paint clothes. Yes, I do.
He talks about the reverence you have to have for your subject matter and how it's only appropriate to wear your best clothes when you're doing a portrait. And how you should never paint when it is humid or smoggy because it will impugn your work. And never do it when you have a snotty nose, because that will affect your ability to blow on the paint in order to warm it.
I'm screwed in Stargate for humidity.
I know, right?
Not gonna work. I'm looking at.
I'm in Atlanta, so yeah.
Yeah, Mom.
Yeah, baby.
Is it okay if I blow you out?
What?
I don't care if I maybe
Is somebody else doing that right now?
no.
Okay, well, you need to ask your brother because I'm still teaching.
Mom.
Thank you.
So what's the name of the book?
I believe
need
it
to
is
get-
called,
Up. I'm looking it up.
I believe
I
it's
need
called
to
The
give you a
Way
heads up,
Painting.
guys. It's
What?
time for the next class to begin, so I'm going to stop
Oh.
the recording.
Sorry.
Okay.
What's the name
Lindsay, any last words?
Name of the book?
The book is The Way How to Limb by Nicholas Hillard. And if you guys have any other questions or you want to talk to me more about this, ping me. I'm on Facebook all the time. Thank you for coming
Thank
to learn
you.
today.
Thank
I
you.
hope something was good.